Chapter 14b. I wonder, Mary said slowly, if it would not do him good to get out into the garden and watch things growing. It did me good. One of the worst fits he ever had, said Martha, was one time when we took him out where the roses are by the fountain. He'd been reading in a paper about people getting something called a rose cold, and he began to sneeze, and he said he got it, and then a new gardener came by that didn't know the rules, and he looked at him in a curious way, and he threw himself into a passion. He said he looked at him because he was going to be a hunchback, and he cried himself into a fever and was ill all night. If he ever gets angry at me, I'll never go and see him again, said Mary. He'll have thee if he wants thee, said Martha. Thou may as well know that from the start. Very soon afterward a bell rang, and she rolled up her knitting. I dare say the nurse wants me to sit with him a bit, she said. I hope he's in a good temper. She was out of the room about 10 minutes, and then she came back with a puzzled expression. Well, thou hast bewitched him, she said. He's up on his sofa with his picture books, and he told the nurse to stay away until 6 o'clock, and I'm to wait in the next room. The minute she was gone, he called to me and he says, I want Mary Lennox to come and talk to me, and remember, you're not to tell anyone. You'd better go as quick as you can. Well, Mary was quite willing to go quickly. She did not want to see Colin as much as she wanted to see Deacon, but she did want to see him very much. There was a bright fire on the hearth when she entered his room, and in the daylight she saw it was a very beautiful room indeed. There were rich colors in the rugs and hangings and pictures and books, and the walls made it look glowing and comfortable, even in spite of the gray sky and the falling rain. Colin looked rather like a picture himself. He was wrapped in a velvet dressing gown and sat against a big brocaded cushion. He had a red spot high on each cheek. Come in, he said. I've been thinking about you all morning. I've been thinking about you too, answered Mary. You don't know how frightened Martha is. She says Miss Medlock will think that she told me about you, and then she will be sent away. He frowned. Go and tell her to come here, he said. She's in the next room. Mary went and brought her back. Poor Martha was shaking in her shoes. Colin was still frowning. Have you to do what I please, or have you not? He demanded. I have to do what you please, sir, Martha faltered, turning quite red. Has Miss Medlock to do what I please? Everybody has, sir, said Martha. Well then, if I order you to bring Miss Mary to me, how can Medlock send you away if she finds out? Oh, please don't let her, sir, pleaded Martha. I'll send her away if she dares to say a word about such a thing, said Master Craven grandly. She wouldn't like that, I can tell you. Thank you, sir, bobbing a curtsy. I want to do my duty, sir. What I want is your duty, said Colin more grandly. I'll take care of you. Now go away. When the door closed behind Martha, Colin found Mistress Mary gazing at him as if he had set her to wondering. Why do you look at me like that? He asked her. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about two things. What are they? Sit down and tell me. This is the first one, said Mary, seating herself on the big stool. Once, in India, I saw a boy who was a Raja. He had rubies and emeralds and diamonds stuck all over him, and he spoke to his people just as you speak to Martha. Everybody had to do everything he told them in a minute. I think they would have been killed if they hadn't. I shall make you tell me more about Rajas presently, he said. But first, tell me what the second thing was. I was thinking, said Mary, how very different you are from Deacon. Who is Deacon? He said. What a strange name. She might as well tell him, she thought. She could talk about Deacon without mentioning the secret garden. She'd like to hear Martha talk about him. Besides, she longed to talk about him. It would seem to bring him nearer. "He is Martha's brother. He is 12 years old," she explained. "He is not like anyone else in the world. He can charm foxes and squirrels and birds, just as the natives in India charm snakes. He plays a very soft tune on a pipe, and they come and listen." There were some big books on a table at his side, and he dragged one suddenly towards him. "There's a picture of a snake charmer in this," he exclaimed. "Come and look at it." The book was a beautiful one, with superb color illustrations, and he turned to one of them. "Can he do that?" he asked eagerly. "Well, he plays his pipe, and they listen," Mary explained, "but he doesn't call it magic. He says it's because he lives on the moor so much and he knows their ways. He says he feels sometimes as if he were a bird or a rabbit himself. He likes them so much. I think he asked the robin questions. It seemed as if they talked to each other in soft little chirps." Colin lay back on his cushions, and his eyes grew larger and larger, and the spots on his cheeks burned. "Tell me some more about him," he said. "Well, he knows all about eggs and nests," Mary went on, "and he knows where foxes and badgers and otters live. He keeps them secret so that the other boys won't find their holes and frighten them. He knows about everything that grows or lives on the moor." "Does he like the moor?" said Colin. "How can he when it's such a great, bare, dreary place?" "Oh, it's the most beautiful place," protested Mary. "Thousands of lovely things grow on it, and there are thousands of little creatures all busy building nests and making holes and burrows and chirping and singing and squeaking to each other. They are all so busy and having such fun under the earth or in the trees or heather. It's their world." "How do you know all that?" said Colin. "I've never been there once, really," said Mary, suddenly remembering. "I only drove over it in the dark. I thought it was hideous. Martha told me about it first, and then Deacon. And when Deacon talks about it, you feel as if you saw things and heard them, and as if you were standing in the heather with the sun shining and the gorse smelling like honey, all full of bees and butterflies." "You never see anything if you're ill," said Colin restlessly. He looked like a person listening to a new sound in the distance and wondering what it was. "You can't if you stay in a room," said Mary. "I couldn't go on the moor," he said in a resentful tone. Mary was silent for a minute, and then she said something bold. "Well, you might, sometime." He moved as if he was startled. "Go on the moor? How could I? I'm going to die." "How do you know?" said Mary unsympathetically. She didn't like the way he had of talking about dying. She did not feel very sympathetic. She felt rather almost as if he were boasting about it. "Oh, I've heard it ever since I can remember," he answered crossly. "They're always whispering about it and thinking I don't notice. They wish I would, too." Mistress Mary felt quite contrary. She pinched her lips together. "If they wished I would," she said. "I wouldn't. Who wishes you would?" "The servants, and of course Dr. Craven, because then he would get Misselthwaite and be rich instead of poor. He daren't say so, but he always looks cheerful when I'm worse. When I had typhoid fever, his face got quite fat. I think my father wishes it too." "I don't believe he does," said Mary quite obstinately. That made Colin turn and look at her again. "Don't you?" he said, and then he lay back on his cushions and was still, as if he were thinking. And there was quite a long silence. Perhaps they were both of them thinking strange things that children do not usually think of.